She thought he was just another lonely customer. But what she discovered about this mysterious man sitting at table 7 every single morning for 3 years would shatter everything she believed about love, fate, and the power of a broken heart. Margaret wiped down the counter for the 100th time that morning, watching him through the corner of her eye. He sat there again at table 7 with his black coffee and untouched blueberry muffins, staring out the window like he was waiting for someone who would never come. 3 years. 3 years he had been coming to her little cafe every morning at exactly 8:15, ordering the same thing, sitting at the same table, never speaking to anyone except to whisper, "Thank you," when she brought his order. The other customers had stopped noticing him long ago, but Margaret couldn't stop wondering, who was he? What was his story? Why did he look so heartbroken every single day? Today felt different, though. Today there was something in his eyes, something desperate, something final. She had seen that look before in her own mirror after David left her standing at the altar 5 years ago. The morning rush died down, and Margaret found herself walking toward his table with a fresh pot of coffee. She had never initiated conversation before, but something told her today might be her last chance. "May I?" She gestured to the empty chair across from him. He looked up, surprised. His eyes were the deepest shade of blue she had ever seen, filled with a sadness so profound it took her breath away. "Please," he said quietly, his voice rough from disuse. Margaret sat down, her heart pounding. She poured coffee into his cup, watching his weathered hands wrap around the ceramic like it was his lifeline. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but I see you here every morning. You seem like you're waiting for someone." His smile was bitter, broken. "I am waiting for someone. Someone who will never come." Margaret felt her chest tighten. There was something about the way he said it that made her want to reach across the table and hold his hand. 3 years ago, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "My wife Sarah used to come here every morning. She would sit right here at this table, working on her laptop, writing in her journal, drinking that terrible herbal tea you serve." Margaret remembered Sarah, a beautiful woman with auburn hair and kind eyes who always smiled at everyone. She had stopped coming suddenly, and Margaret had assumed she moved away. Sarah had dreams, he continued. She wanted to open her own cafe someday, a place where people could feel at home, where stories could unfold, where love could bloom. She used to sketch her ideas on napkins, talking about every detail from the color of the walls to the type of music that would play. Sarah passed away. Margaret whispered the words forming in her throat before she could stop them. He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. 3 years ago today. Car accident on her way to work. She never got to see her dream come true. Never got to open that cafe she talked about so passionately. Margaret felt the world tilt on its axis. Something cold and strange crept up her spine. "I come here every morning," he continued, "because this is where she was happiest. This is where her dreams lived. This is where I can still feel her presence." The coffee cup slipped from Margaret's hands, crashing to the floor. Hot liquid splashed everywhere, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing, connecting dots that couldn't possibly connect. What was her last name, she whispered. Thompson, Sarah Thompson. Margaret stood up so quickly her chair fell backward. The sound echoed through the nearly empty cafe like a gunshot. Her hands were shaking, her breathing shallow. "That's impossible," she breathed. He looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Margaret ran to the back office, her heart hammering against her ribs. She pulled out a box from under her desk, a box she hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside were papers, documents she had tried to forget. With trembling fingers, she found what she was looking for. The deed to the cafe. The paperwork from when she bought the building. The name of the previous owner, who had left specific instructions about how the space should be used. Sarah Thompson. The woman who had sold Margaret this building 3 years ago. The woman who had made her promise to keep it as a cafe to honor someone's dreams. The woman who had seemed so sad, so desperate to ensure her husband's favorite place would remain unchanged. Margaret walked back to the dining area on unsteady legs. The man was still sitting there, staring out the window, unaware that his entire world was about to change. She placed the deed on the table in front of him. "This cafe," she said, her voice breaking, "this building, It belonged to Sarah. She sold it to me 3 years ago, right before she died. She made me promise to keep it exactly as it was. She said it was for someone she loved. Someone who needed this place to remember. He picked up the deed, his hands shaking as he read his wife's name at the top. "I don't understand," he whispered. Margaret sat down again, tears streaming down her face. Sarah didn't just love this place, she owned it. She bought this building 2 years before she died. She was planning to turn it into the cafe of her dreams. But then she got sick. Terminal cancer. She had 6 months. The color drained from his face. Cancer. But she died in a car accident. Margaret shook her head gently. She was driving to the hospital for her final treatment. She never told you she was sick because she didn't want you to spend her last months watching her die. She wanted you to remember her healthy and happy. She sold me this building with very specific instructions. It had to remain a cafe. Everything had to stay the same, especially table 7. She said the love of her life would come here every morning, and this place needed to be here for him. He was crying now, deep sobs that shook his entire body. Margaret reached across the table and took his hand. "She planned all of this," she continued. "She knew you would come here. She knew you would need this place. She made sure it would always be here waiting for you. But why didn't she tell me? Why did she let me think it was an accident? Because she loved you too much to let you watch her suffer. She wanted your last memories to be of her laughing and dreaming, not fighting a battle she couldn't win." Margaret pulled out another document from the box, a letter addressed to Thomas Thompson. "She left this for you. Sarah asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I think the time is now." Thomas took the letter with shaking hands. His name was written in Sarah's familiar handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in her words. "My dearest Thomas, if you are reading this, then you have discovered the truth about our cafe. Yes, our cafe. Because this has always been our dream. Even if you didn't know it. I bought this building for us for the future we plan to have together. I know you think I died suddenly, but I have been sick for a while. I chose not to tell you, because I wanted our last months to be filled with love, not fear. I know you, Tom. I know that when I am gone, you will come to our cafe every morning. I know you will sit at our table and remember. I know you will be lost without me. So I made sure this place would always be here for you. But Tom, my love, this place isn't just for remembering. It is for living. It is for the future. I won't be able to share with you. Margaret is special, Tom. I chose her carefully to take over our dream. She lost someone too. She understands heartbreak, but she also understands healing. I need you to do something for me. I need you to live. I need you to let yourself be happy again. I need you to help Margaret make this place everything we dreamed it could be. This cafe was built on love. Tom, our love. It should continue to be a place where love grows, where hearts heal, where new stories begin. I will always be with you, but I cannot be your whole world anymore. Let Margaret show you that there is still beauty in this life, still reasons to smile, still love to be found. The woman reading this to you, she is your second chance. Take it forever yours." Sarah Thomas finished reading and looked up at Margaret through his tears. She was crying too, understanding finally why she had felt such a strong connection to this place, why she had agreed to Sarah's unusual terms, why she had watched this broken man every morning for 3 years. Sarah planned this. Margaret whispered. She wanted us to meet. She wanted us to help each other heal. Thomas reached across the table and took both of Margaret's hands in his. For the first time in 3 years, his smile reached his eyes. "She always was too clever for her own good," he said softly. "Tell me about yourself, Margaret. Tell me how a woman ends up buying a cafe to honor a stranger's dreams." So, Margaret told him about David and the wedding that never happened, about how she had been wandering aimlessly when Sarah found her, about how buying this cafe had felt like fate, about how watching him every morning had slowly helped her believe in love again. They talked until the sun began to set, sharing stories of loss and heartbreak and the long journey toward healing. They talked about Sarah and David, about dreams deferred and love that transcends death. When the last customer left and Margaret began closing up, Thomas helped her stack chairs and wipe down tables. It felt natural, like they had been partners for years, rather than strangers who had finally found the courage to speak. "Margaret," he said as she locked the front door, "I have a confession to make." She turned to face him, her heart beating faster. "I noticed you too," he said quietly. "These past 3 years I watched you care for your customers. Treat everyone with such kindness. I started coming here not just for Sarah, but because seeing you reminded me that there was still goodness in the world." Margaret felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. "What happens now?" she asked. "I think," Thomas said, stepping closer, "I think we honor Sarah's wish. I think we make this place everything she dreamed it could be. Together." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Margaret and Thomas stood outside the cafe that had brought them together. A cafe built on love loss and the unshakable belief that healing is possible, that second chances exist, that love can bloom even in the darkest soil. Sarah had given them both a gift, the gift of each other, the gift of hope, the gift of a love story that was just beginning. The next morning at 8:15, Thomas arrived at the cafe. But this time, instead of sitting alone at table 7, he walked behind the counter, tied on an apron, and helped Margaret prepare for the morning rush. Regular customers noticed the change immediately. The sad man was smiling. The quiet cafe owner was laughing. Together they moved like dancers who had been practicing their routine for years, and on table 7 now sat a small framed photo of Sarah Thompson, her bright smile watching over the cafe she had dreamed of. The love she had orchestrated, the healing she had made possible. Some customers asked about the photo, and Margaret would tell them the story of a woman who loved so deeply. She planned for her husband's happiness even after she was gone, who bought a building and orchestrated a love story, who proved that love never really dies, it just finds new ways to bloom. Months passed, and the cafe flourished under Thomas and Margaret's care. They added new items to the menu, including Sarah's favorite herbal tea. They hosted poetry nights and book clubs and community gatherings. They created exactly the kind of place Sarah had envisioned, a place where stories unfolded, where hearts healed, where love could grow. On the anniversary of Sarah's death, Thomas and Margaret stood together in front of table 7, holding hands as they read her letter aloud to an empty cafe. Their voices mingled in the morning light, carrying words of love and gratitude into the space that had saved them both. "Thank you," Sarah Margaret whispered to the photo. Thomas squeezed her hand and smiled. "Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for teaching us that love doesn't end, it just transforms. Thank you for this beautiful second chance." And if you listened carefully in that moment, you might have heard something like laughter floating through the cafe, something like approval, something like a woman who had loved so perfectly, she had managed to orchestrate happiness even from beyond the grave. The cafe continued to thrive, becoming known throughout the city as a place where miracles happened, where love stories began, where broken hearts came to heal. People would travel from miles away just to sit at table 7 to hear the story of Sarah and Thomas and Margaret, to believe that love really could conquer death. And every morning at 8:15, Thomas would pour coffee, and Margaret would serve warm pastries, and together they would honor the woman who had brought them together. The woman who had proved that love is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of building bridges across time and space and even death itself. Years later, when people asked them how they met, Thomas and Margaret would smile and tell them about a cafe built on love, about a woman who orchestrated their happiness from beyond the grave, about the morning they finally spoke and discovered that some love stories are written in the stars. They would tell them that true love never dies. It just finds new ways to bloom, and sometimes, if you are very lucky, it will bloom for you. when you need it most, in a little cafe where dreams come true and hearts learn to heal, and love always finds a way.